I'd like to welcome you to the Nobody Oxfordian channel. I call it that because that's what I am. I'm not an author, not a poet, not an editor. I am not a historian or a teacher of the subject. I do, however, have an interest and a fascination in the topic and hope to make a contribution to the Oxfordian cause. I would strongly recommend that you watch all of Alexander Waugh's YouTube channel videos on this subject of Edward de Vere being the author of the William Shakespeare poems and plays. Otherwise, the things that I point out will not make sense to you. This is the 1640 John Benson publication of William Shakespeare's poems. Alexander Waugh has a video on this book in which he talks about the portrait and the writing underneath. It was that video that I first learned of this book. And I noticed something on the right side that contributes to the theory that the Earl of Oxford was the true author of the William Shakespeare poems and plays. And it is a theory because there are no manuscripts of the plays or first writings of the poems in Edward de Vere's hands. But there is also no manuscripts or poems in William Shakespeare from Stratford-upon-Avon either. I would like to focus on the title page of this book. It says Poems Written by William Shakespeare, Gent. Now, I've looked at other copies of this title page, and they're all the same. And the reason I point that out is because there is a select group of individuals during this time and shortly after William Shakespeare's death that knew of the coding, the letters, the numbers associated with Earl of Oxford that put these codes into various printings and also their poems on William Shakespeare. As William Shakespeare's popularity grew over the centuries, his books became popular to own, and many of these books are missing pages, including title pages or lithographs of the portrait of William Shakespeare, and as a result, facsimiles were made. And when a facsimile is made or reprinted, even, the typesetter and the new artist may change things, may change subtle things about the manuscript, the way the letterings are placed, may change the lettering, making the coding not valid. And as such, when we look at title pages, manuscripts, poems, we want to look at originals. And in this case, this is an original title page, of which I've seen others like it, and they're all the same. I've removed the simple word written and placed it above. When we draw a line from the W all the way through to the N, it becomes obvious that the last three letters, T-E-N, are offset slightly to the right and then also slightly raised. So the T and E are raised above ever so slightly the rest of the lettering. In search for the coding, this 10 is done intentionally, and so we'll set off that number to the side and write 10. Now, if you step back and look at the written word again, it becomes obvious that the typesetter, the person publishing this book, either intently or under direction from someone, separated out the number 10. Now, if we count the letters in written, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 letters in the word written. And now we add 7 to 10 for 17, of course. And this is the code or representation of the 17th Earl of Oxford, which was Edward de Vere. Now let's look at the first letter of the word written. Written starts with W. And in this case, the typesetter used 2 V's. Now Now, does that mean that during the 1600s they did not have the ability to produce one letter typeset that was a W? Of course not. If you look back at the manuscript, will is spelt with one typeset word W. So why would the typesetter, the author of this book, or under the direction of, choose to use two V's? The double V is important because the 17th Earl of Oxford, Edward de Vere, sometimes used double V as initials. The double V from his family motto in Latin of viro, nihil, various. Two of those Latin words starting with the letter V, thus double V. And with Latin gematria used during that time for coding of words, in this case, a V was assigned 20, and so Edward de Vere would commonly be known as 40. Two V's together, 20 plus 20 is 40. I wanted to show you Edward de Vere's double V signature. Of course, in the 1600s, there were no envelopes. They would write their letters on parchment, fold it, seal it with wax, and then write a letterhead, if you will, on the back of the parchment. In this case, Edward de Vere wrote a letter to Robert Cecil, in which he said, "To my very well-loved brother, Robert Cecil, Principal Secretary to Her Majesty." And as you can see, he signed it, initialed it, double V. And now we can simply tie everything together here. In this book, printed in 1640, about 30 years after Edward de Vere's death, we have a word written. And if you look at it now, you'll notice that the 10 off to the side is separate from the rest of the word, indicating 10, of course. Then there are 7 letters. 10 plus 7 is 17. And then the W is actually 2 V's placed together, which is 20 plus 20 and 40. So we have Edward Oxford's code 1740 here in one word on a title page of poems dedicated to William Shakespeare. I think this coding for this word written is very obvious and simple and can be easily seen by the eye now after someone pointing it out to you. On the left side is the lithogram of a copy of the Droschard portrait of William Shakespeare. That's how we knew him for the last 500 years. Looking at this portrait, there are obvious things to my eye about 1740. And I like to spend a few minutes pointing those out as well. Now, these are not as conclusive as the word written. It's not as easily to follow. There will be some debate, discussion, and uncertainty as to whether that was the intent of the author of the book or the person who made the lithograph. It's unsure, but it's worth looking at. The first thing that stood out at me was the obvious 7. And then on the breastplate, I can see a 1 and then 0. And as we know, these two add up to 17, which is the 17th Earl of Oxford, Edward de Vere. Now let's look at the plant that's in his hand. This is called bays, and this is symbolic for poetry. And grasped in his hand is a branch of bays, and on this branch is, guess how many leaves? Do you think there's 19 leaves or 21 leaves or 30 leaves? No, above the wrist is 20 leaves. And then I noticed 2 circles. They're likely berries, but there are 2 that indicate to me that we should double the number 20 to 40. There are not 3 berries, there are not 4 berries, there's not 1 berry, there's 2. 2 berries in the presence of 20 leaves. 2 times 20 is 40. Again, 40 being the number associated with Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, via the double V, which gives us in Latin gematria 40. For the keen-eye observer, you may notice that there might be an extra leaf in this vase, making for 21. But to me, this is a change made by the artist of the lithogram. He likely did have 21 leaves and then noticed that that was incorrect, or his patron asked him to change it, and they eliminated the leaf by adding in those horizontal lines that are part of the clothing. This to me shows intent of there being exactly 20 leaves above that wrist. (1740) and 1740. So we have two 1740s on the opening pages of a book published to promote William Shakespeare's poems. And it took over 400 years for us to catch up. Thank you for watching.